We are now turning to the second panel of today, which is about policies for local content, capability building and sustainable industrialization in development economies. And we have three presenters here. We have Dr. Kingiri, whom I will introduce in a short minute. And then we have Faith Wandera, and we have Ulrich, who is standing in for Lakshmi. So before I give the floor to Anne Kingiri, I would like to just request if you can, when you post questions, and we really value your questions in the chat, can you please specify to whom the question is directed? It would help us make sure that we get everybody onto the screen at the right, or rather that you get the right person to reply to your question if there's any specific person. You may also say that it's to everybody, but if you can, please specify to whom your question is directed. So our first speaker now in this second panel is Dr. Anne Kingiri from ACTS. And you also don't need a lot of introduction, but I will say that you have a very interdisciplinary training background within biology, within environmental science, innovation and development studies. It's a big pleasure for me to work with you always. You have vast experience in networking and advocacy, and you have been publishing quite widely on innovation and development issues. So we look very much forward to your presentation, in this case, based on the research you have done with us within the context of the IREC project. Over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Margareta, for the introduction. Thank you. And I now open up the session, which is going to be switching from technical stuff, although quite a number of policy issues have actually come up in the discussion, and also from the speakers. We switch now to the policy discussion, reflecting on local content issues with regards to how this is supposed to foster sustainable industrialization. Our research captured quite a number of things, but I would want to just summarize what we did by giving an introduction on the motivation that has prompted us to go this direction, and what do we understand by capabilities and local content requirements, and what are the gaps and opportunities that we found in our research, particularly when looking at the historical process, the historical evolution of Kenya's energy policy process. And I'll conclude with a few reflections on what is this that we need to focus on in terms of local content requirements and capability with a focus on industrialization and sustainable industrialization. As an introduction, I think this has been alluded, particularly in the previous session, that we do have now quite a number of activities going on in this area of renewable electrification. We are seeing increased number of farms, especially those which are dealing with off-grid energy farms. And Rebecca's presentation had quite a number of those farms. And this is actually a motivation for not just the policymakers, it's also a motivation for researchers like us, who are focusing on innovation and development thinking in this particular sector, something which perhaps has not been done, and something which encourages us to actually look at these things from a transdisciplinary perspective. So our research under IREC basically analyzed that process, the Kenya's energy policy process through the lens of local content requirements. I'm going to define what I mean by that later, and also through the lens of capabilities. And the two of them actually, they can be used interchangeably. You'll see how they relate to each other, local content requirements and capabilities. And basically we sought to ask two questions that all were focusing on capacities within the policy process, as well as what are the opportunities that we could think about in terms of thinking about the future in terms of industrialization. We used a qualitative approach. Basically, we administered a survey, but we also had some interaction with the key stakeholders, to kind of get their perspectives about that particular process. So in terms of what we mean by local capabilities and local content requirements, we do find that renewable technologies basically aim to contribute to two main aspects. Focus on political, social, and economic endeavors, but also focus on sustainable industrialization. And this is our focus for this particular seminar. And when we look at emerging economies like Kenya, and how that can be translated, we see that happening in the process of enhancing technology transfer, in the process of creation of new industries, provision of jobs for local people. So there are quite a number of aspects that reflect on the two aspects of what renewable technologies are aiming to do. Looking at the local content requirements, if you look at many of the papers that have been published, especially focusing on Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, this tool is being used as a policy tool, as an industrial policy tool, local content requirements. And this is where it is expected that there will be some kind of, translation, of some form of capabilities to local farms or by the private sector. And it is been used to provide protection to local farms while they accumulate necessary capabilities to a level where they can actually compete with their other companies, locally or international. Basically, that's what is perceived to be local content requirement. It now has become an industrial policy tool. And it is actually a provision that binds foreign investors and companies to support young local industries or young local firms to actually get the capacities that they need to be able to compete. Local content itself, it looks at the use of local expertise and basically focusing on development of both national capabilities and other capabilities which could be at the farm level or at the individual level, or focusing on enhancement of the economy. So having understood what we mean by local capabilities and local content requirement and how this has been used, in our research.
And can I request you to maybe speed up a little bit because you don't have more than 5 minutes left?
I have maybe 2-3 slides remaining. I don't have many
Great.
slides. Okay, so from our research, we were able to analyze our policy instruments which are focusing on energy. And we were able to conclude that at the early years of the policy process, the focus was basically on social and economic aspects, but very, very minimal considerations of local capabilities. But after 2014 and up to now, because now we have an act of parliament, we can actually see the process kind of provided for incorporation of capabilities in different forms, and local capacity, tax exemption, licensing, rules and regulations and qualifications and experiences. So there are quite what we can consider to be, some policy milestones in one way or another. But we also find that there were quite a number of issues coming up. And one of them has to do with that promotion of renewable energy actually offers opportunities to promote local technical and managerial capabilities. But it was found that capabilities are basically inadequate in both the solar and wind sectors, which would be enough to steer what we are looking at here, sustainable industrialization. And there was emphasis to actually focus on the capabilities which are lacking These are capabilities in operations and maintenance, particularly in the weed sector. And there were also the feeling by some of the stakeholders that Kenya should actually not, rely on foreign firms for operations and maintenance of expertise, which could actually be sourced from the local market. I find then to conclude my presentation, I have quite a number of reflections which would focus on policy and practice. And one of them has to do with, there is need to combine both human resource development, which could be considered to be a key capability, but also combine that with local content issues, which are very, very critical to enhance industrialization in this sector. We found that participatory in the policy process is basically critical, particularly for researchers who would actually generate, the needed evidence to inform decisions. And then we can argue that because now we do have an act of parliament which has got provisions for local content requirements, then this should actually be a window of opportunity for researchers and policymakers to enhance the needed capabilities for the local farms and local manufacturers. And another recommendation is that collaboration is going to remain critical in this sector, and it should be promoted, but in the context of enforcement of local content requirements, in addition to other forms of capabilities, the human-related capabilities. Then there's something which is critical here when we are looking at policy process and practice, is that when we look at capabilities, different stakeholders have got different ways of, understanding this concept. And that is very, very key, especially when it comes to creation of the needed awareness that among all the stakeholders. So that is critical when we are developing, tools for capacity building, tools for information sharing. That is very critical. And as I said earlier, evidence for influencing policy change is also critical, but also timing. When do we, engage in the policy process? Finally, the final point is that sustainable industrialization, because this is what we are looking at here, can only be realized if we can create, a conducive policy environment that would support capabilities on one hand, as well as collaboration on the other. Back to you, Margareta. I've finished.
Thank you very much, Anne, for a fascinating presentation here on the, not least on the historical developments of these issues, and also for bringing out these important points about the importance to develop capabilities of all and awareness among all types of stakeholders, and the timing issue of engagement as being key for whether you can actually influence policies and what is going on. So thanks a lot. I would like to now give the floor to Faith Wandera, who is from the Kenyan Ministry of Energy. Faith is a senior deputy director, to get it correct. Faith, are you there? I hope you're there, and maybe either you bring up your slides as I speak, or we ask Moses to do so. Faith has a broad experience as a renewable energy policy expert with emphasis on bioenergy development, and a broad experience also from international negotiations, and not least from leading Kenya's work on sustainable energy for all over a period of time. And we are thrilled that Faith is also, not least in this context, a PhD student both at Aalborg University in Denmark and at Moi University in Kenya. Faith, we look forward to your presentation. Over to you. Faith, are you there? Maybe you're muted. Oops. Faith.
Yes, I am there.
Ah, you're there. Good. Excellent. So the slides are gone now, but they were there just a second ago. So maybe we can have the slides up again. Are you bringing them up yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. Okay. Over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Margreta. I'm presenting on policies for appropriate pathways in energy and sustainable industrialization. I'm happy to be part of this panel, though I haven't previously participated in other events on Kalestas Juma, or I haven't even met him in person. But I'm really glad to be on this panel today. And in my presentation, I have the introduction session, then I'll talk about the state of learning.
Can you enlarge the PowerPoint, please? Thanks.
Sorry about that.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'll talk about the state of learning, innovation, and capability development with the focus on Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, and Kenya. Now, and then after that, I'll look at the gaps in policy identified from a survey conducted within the project. And then I'll look at the gaps also identified in the innovation system. I used the technological innovation systems approach to do my PhD study, and I'll be highlighting some of the issues I established in the small wind sector in Kenya. Then I'll finalize with the implications for policy. Under the introduction, I would like to note that the sustainable energy pathways are embedded in SDG 7, which has been mentioned earlier. And under SDG 7, we have been, at least many countries have been developing sustainable energy for all action agendas, including Kenya. Kenya did ours, we did ours in 2016. And this report focuses on energy access, energy efficiency, and renewable energy. And the drivers for this renewable energy are mainly climate change mitigation, household air pollution and health, energy security, energy access, and income generation, as well as job creation. Now, there have been arguments about whether renewable energy is really the solution to what we are going through in this 21st century. But the main argument has been focusing around the kind of the waste generated from renewable energy technologies. But there are also arguments for renewable energy in off-grid areas, owing to the lack of infrastructure for conventional energy sources. And a lot of the people living in these off-grid areas are disadvantaged with regards to energy access. And the argument has been that renewable energy could actually be the solution to helping them move up the energy ladder. The IREC project focus was on solar and wind, and it was also dealing with the issues to do with the learning, innovation, and development of capabilities, as previously alluded to by previous speakers. So this slide basically looks at the state of learning, innovation, and capability development in Sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, and Kenya. And the literature tells us about Sub-Saharan Africa largely trading in unprocessed products attributed to low levels of technological learning. And most R&D institutions are engaged in agriculture rather than manufacturing. Supply of modern skills is inadequate and the physical infrastructure is weak. And in East Africa, it's more or less similar. Operational capabilities are needed to compete internationally in simple technologies are still lacking. And in Kenya, we find that mostly informal sector, small businesses focus on introducing new products rather than processes, and they have a weak innovation culture. I won't belabor these slides because yesterday we got a very good presentation from Professor Banji covering the whole of Africa and how we are doing in terms of industrialization. So I will just move to the next slide, which is a slide drawn from the IREC Work Package 5 survey of 2016. And what I'm showing you here is there are some quotations from respondents from the survey, which was conducted by team members for the IREC project. The previous speaker has alluded about this study. And first of all, it is noted that some of the gaps in policy making, the respondents of the survey indicated that the capacity building is done in the wrong places. For example, people attending the wrong courses, and even after they have been trained, you find that they are not tested on how competent they are in delivering what they have been trained on, and they do not. They are not tested even on project implementation, which could stimulate demand for renewable energy technologies after this training. Then thirdly, there's the lack of political will to support training. And there's the limited technical capacity also mentioned by the previous speaker. There's outsourcing of personnel for major contracts on almost everything, particularly for wind. And political interference. I think you are aware of some wind project which was stopped in Kenya because of some political interference. Then lastly, there's inadequate intellectual property rights at the local level to protect international patents. Now, having looked at the broader view provided by this survey, I will now move to the gaps identified in the small wind innovation system in Kenya. Using the technological innovation system approach, it was established that the technological innovation system for small wind is quite weak in Kenya. And I came to this conclusion because having assessed all the 7 functions of the technological innovation system, I found that all of them rated less than 2 on a scale of 0 to 6, where 0 stands for non-existent and 6 is very strong. There is also limited availability of data for developing small wind systems and a lack of technical expertise to analyze the data. I look back at 2010 when we started collecting wind data between 20 meters and 40 meters. And that data has never been analyzed up to date. And therefore, we really do not know whether this data is useful for developing small winds or not. Then thirdly, there's no incorporation of wind in the 26 mini grids that have been installed in the country. 2 of these actually are the only ones which have wind. The others are just solar PV. And yet we find that the potential for hybridization has been established from studies that have been conducted in Kenya. Then I also found that policy documents have targets set for large wind and other renewable energies, but not for small wind. So this is a very big gap because without targets, we really cannot know which side we are moving. And the lack of a dedicated budget for small wind is also a big setback in terms of developing small winds. The money that is available has mostly been used for installing data loggers. There have been low levels of research and development, and most wind products in the market are imported. And lastly, the capabilities in developing countries are generally lower. They were established to be more or less at a basic level when compared with the developed countries, which were established to be intermediate to pre-advanced. The assessment was done both at farm and national levels. And this is what I established from my study. Now, moving on, in terms of what this means for small wind, we find that we need to increase on capability development to enhance national capabilities, particularly the installation, operation, and maintenance of small winds. And we also need to better use the linkages that we have access to with respect to tapping into the flow of knowledge and skills resulting from partnership with developed countries. And there are weaknesses in the innovation system for small wind needed to be addressed. They need to be addressed to improve the fulfillment of the technological innovation system functions. Well, in my concluding remarks, I could just say that currently there's an ongoing project on capacity building in the country. This is happening under the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The project is funded by EU. It started in 2020 and it's supposed to end in 2024. What is happening is capacity at national level and counties is being conducted through this project, mainly because of the provision in the Energy Act that devolves energy functions from national level to county level. So we are trying to enable the counties to be able to deliver on planning for energy services in the country. And this is something we hope to make progress on. It is not project-based, but we at least want to enable the counties to be able to think about their energy needs, plan for them, implement the projects, monitor, and also report to the national level. Thank you very much. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Faith, for an excellent presentation and for almost keeping to time. So we will. I sincerely hope that there will be questions posed also to Faith and to Anne in the chat as we go along. I can see there are already very good and important questions coming up. To avoid much delay in today's presentations, I would like to now give the floor to Ulrik Elmar Hansen, who is from DTU-UNEP in Copenhagen here. Ulrik, thanks a heaps. Thanks a lot for standing in for Lakshmi, who unfortunately could not be with us today. So I think, I have to want to say about you that you've been a very active participant in the IREC project, and we very much appreciated the interactions with you. And you're also very active in publishing on technological capabilities development in developing countries related to UNEP issues and so on, energy issues. So we look very much forward to your presentation today as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margrethe. And I think I'll try to share my screen immediately here.
Great, it seems to work.
Okay,
so,
good.
That's nice.
So yeah, thank you for inviting me. And I'm of course here stepping in on behalf of my colleague Lakshmi. And I hope that I can do my best to live up to the expectations. What I'll be presenting here, and I'll try to keep it as short as possible, is based on the work that we have done in the IREC project, which has been a joint effort involving several researchers, including Rasmus and Cecilie and others. So basically, we have it also draws here on some of the work that we've been doing also in Kenya, and to some extent also on some of our work in South Africa. So of course, the topic of interest here is the role, you could say, specifically of policies in order to capture value locally, and that relates, of course, to these broader issues that have been discussed during today regarding sustainable industrialization and so forth. And in this particular piece of work, which is one chapter in the book, is focusing, as Rasmus mentioned, on the role of Chinese investments in renewable energy in Africa. So that is, of course, you could say a more specific topic of interest, focusing on Chinese investments. So if you look at it, what we're talking about here is large-scale renewable energy. And if you look at that from a you could say a broad perspective, you probably already are aware that, you know, if you're looking at solar PV and wind power, that has increased dramatically in a relatively short period of time of 10 years, as you can see some of the figures showing on the slide here. There was a report released some years ago by the IEA, which was looking at what is the specific role of Chinese investors in this regard. And there hasn't been a lot of studies looking in, but most of what have been done so far has been looking at this kind of more aggregate level of research, trying to figure out what are the volume of flows of investments coming in from China into different areas of energy and renewable energy. So in this report, it was pointed out that around 30% of the investments in new renewable energy capacity was around 30% of which was involving Chinese, you could say, dominated projects. And this is a trend that has, you could say, continued afterwards. So we are seeing increasingly that Chinese investors, companies, both technology suppliers, EPC contractors, and so forth are still a very active and prominent actor, you could say, in this investment landscape overall. So of course, a lot of this, or the most part, is going into large-scale hydro, but a lot of this is also going into, you could say, newly emerging renewable energy technologies such as solar PV and wind power. So as I mentioned, a lot of this previous research has been looking into, you could say, the broad investment flows and who are the specific actors from China involved in different projects in different countries, and so forth. And of course, a lot of this debate has attracted a lot of controversy, and it's a highly debated issue, which of course relates to a broader topic of China in Africa. And I will not be going into that discussion in this particular presentation, but just want to say that the publications that we have made in this project and elsewhere is very much focusing on contributing to this larger debate on the role of China in Africa, explored in this case in the context of renewable energy, right? Because of this, primary focus on the aggregate level of research, there's been quite limited research on renewable energy projects, focusing on these economic co-benefits that we've been talking about in several presentations today. For example, related to skills development, transfer of technology, knowledge, job creation, income creation, local production, etc. So the research that we've done has tried to provide a contribution into this debate. So very briefly, we have studied three particular Chinese-dominated projects. One is in Kenya. Rebecca mentioned the Garissa project earlier, but there's also another project in Ghana, the Bui Dam hydropower project, and finally the Adama project in Ethiopia, which is a wind power project. And of course, these are very different projects in different countries, involving different technologies. So they are very much case study research, trying to provide a first, you could say, exploratory attempt to create new knowledge in this area. And there's certainly need for more research in this field, as we've also been pointing at in our research. So here are some of the brief findings and the implications. So when we look at these three projects, we are pointing at, you could say, evidence of what we call bounded benefits. That's a term that we have borrowed from Raphael Kaplinski and Mike Morris and others who have used this term in research related to the role of China in Africa. So what we mean here is that these benefits that we identify in the projects involve very much, you could say, job creation locally, And this is something that we identify as, you could say, that there was actually jobs created, as was mentioned previously in some of the projects. There was also, to some extent, linkages created to local service providers, local sourcing of minor components to the project activities, and to some extent, training of local staff involved in the project activities. But overall, we point at that the extent of these benefits are relatively limited overall in these projects. And we argue that you could say a lot of this has to do with the circumstance that these projects involving Chinese actors are very much, you could say, brought in from the outside as a kind of full turnkey package, which involves, technology suppliers from China, EPC contractors, investors, to some extent also labor, not necessarily imported, but available locally. So that is what we call a kind of a parachuting in, so that these projects to some extent create a kind of local economic enclave. And of course, there are several implications of that, you could say, at the project level, which we've also been looking at, how exactly this plays out in the specific projects. I'll refer to the papers that we've published for anyone interested to learn more about that. So this is just the overall findings. And what is then more interesting from this political perspective, you could say, or governance perspective, is that we also point at this important role that the political system can play in terms of influencing the creation of these local benefits. And here I've just tried to bring out some of the key insights regarding this issue. And of course, there is an important aspect relating to this issue of local content requirements that we've just heard from the previous presentation and also before, that this can actually play a very important role in terms of stimulating or enforcing foreign technology suppliers to localize parts of the component production activities. And what I would like to say here is just that that can certainly be the case, but a lot of this will depend on the design of the local content requirement. There are numerous examples of where this has not worked in other sectors, oil and gas and around the world, but also in renewable energy. We have done some research in South Africa where there is, and we've also conducted a review of what we know about this area in general. So there's a lot about the policy design, not only in terms of, you could say, avoiding loopholes that are easy to navigate around for technology suppliers, but also in simply in terms of what are the requirements actually? Are they actually too low to really spur localization? There's also the issue about what is this actually being monitored and enforced effectively by relevant government agencies and so forth. So it's not you could say, a lot will depend on the modalities of such requirements. Okay. So of course, in this case, we are talking about projects, and there seems to be a kind of preference for in these Chinese projects for, you could say, directly negotiated project contracts, which would be different from other types of policy environments like feed-in tariff systems or auction schemes, which would be more, you could say, competitive and not involving direct government negotiation. But when we're talking about these project-related contracts, then there can, of course, be several elements included in order to enhance, let's say, for example, knowledge transfer or local learning or training of staff. This was certainly shown in the case of Adama in Ethiopia, that there seemed to be, you could say, deliberate thoughts about university involvement and localizing at least some degree of knowledge development.
Thank you very much. Ulrik, are you coming to an end or how is it?
2 seconds, then I'm there.
Super, good.
So of course, it could also go in the other direction. This is again just an example where we can see that, for example, that exemptions of custom duties, which basically you could say encourage import of hardware components from the outside, could in a way undermine these kind of localization efforts. So there is an important point here about looking into, you could say, opposing policies. So the final conclusion here is that, of course, that these co-benefits are not necessarily automatically delivered. It probably requires, you know, deliberate policies and regulation to realize. And the final slide, this is just for further reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ulrik. And I think you did great in stepping in. So super that you could be with us today. Thank you very much. We will distribute the slides afterwards, so everybody will be able to see also the references that you made and so on. We do have now actually not one, but two discussants. So to make sure that we benefit from their views, I would like to now give the floor to Youba Sokona, Vice Chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, since 2015. Dr. Sokona is currently the Special Advisor for Sustainable Development in the South Center. He has over 35 years of experience addressing energy, environment, and sustainable development in Africa, and a lot of things on your CV. So I will not be able to do justice to you, Dr. Youba, but we are extremely pleased that you're taking time to be with us today. And I know you also knew Calestus Juma, so and that is also part of why you're here, I think. So thanks a lot for being here. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be part of this conversation. And I see also that Stefan Karakesi is part of the participant. Him, me, and Calestus, a number of colleagues, African colleagues. And then this is the same issue we discussed in '86. And then traveling in Asia, in Latin America, on energy technologies for development in Africa. And then this is a long way. And then we started, and then the scale we are in. I think that this has been a great presentation on the various issues and the various ingredients on the issue of local content, on capacity building, on innovation, on industrialization. And I will not discuss none of those different aspects that we learn a lot and then that inform a lot, always robust, and then will be very important and then to inform policies at various levels. But let me just look at, because what I understand is that by the end of the year, we'll have a publication of those different elements in this work that has been done. But let us just look at beyond what has been captured, very well captured and presented in since yesterday and then on this morning. And then to look at, we need to have an in-depth discussion on some of the key words, and then that has been brought to our attention. The first one is renewable energy, electrification, sustainability, industrialization, transformation, and energy system. And I think that to approach the issue of local content and then to approach the issue of the industrialization, it's very important, and then to look at the context. The context matters. Why those are needed is for development, and then we need to start with development to interrogate the development issue. An aspect that was clearly indicated as very important is project design, but I will see agenda setting. What is the agenda for Kenya and for the other countries' development? And with the development context, you need two critical elements. One is energy, because without energy, it's impossible and then to achieve any aspect of development. You need industrialization. Let me start with energy, and then why the focus on renewable energy? Because the games have completely changed. And then particularly if we look at the solar energy and then the PV, and then when we discuss and then those different issues, when we start working with Calestus in the beginning of the mid of the 80s, and then all of them have said that, oh, forget about those solar, we'll never be able to make it. But the system have completely changed. And then the price have dramatically dropped. And then the technology is much more mature. And then you have a various possibility and application of the solar. And then it can be because of the scalability, because of the you can, you know, as I usually share, you can power a torch with 3 watts and for 100 megawatts and then to power a city. It's very important, and then to bring those different elements. And that analysis is important to approach the issue of capacity. And then the second element is electrification, because at the global level, and then we are moving toward the electrification of the society, starting with the transport sector. It's very important in the context, and then the solar also in that context will bring us and then to the electrification, to speed up the electrification. It is not only rural or urban or peri-urban or agricultural sector, but electrification for development. And then that's very important, and then to have that in mind. And then that kind of renewable associated with electrification bring us and then to question the energy system. And then that has been indicated by some of the speakers. And then the centralized energy system, the centralized utility grid system is no longer an option, and then for the development and to feed the development. And then that's very important, and then to capture. And then if we design the current energy system based on renewable, particularly those that has been indicated in this report, that will change completely the dynamic. That means even the energy institution, and then we need to question them, and then to redesign them, to rethink them, and then to look at not only the innovation in the technological aspect, but innovation also in institutional innovation aspect. And that means new kind of institutions that need to be put in place. All those is part of the capacity development, the capacity building, and then the capacity mobilization. And it's very important also, and then to bring together in the analysis, and then the 3 components, the 3 stakeholders, and that need to interact permanently. And then where also we need to identify the existing capacity, as it has been alluded by one of the speakers, to start with existing capacity and to see what are the gaps. And then one have to make a distinction between the 3 key clusters of actors that are critical for renewable, for electrification, for energy, for industrialization, is a policy cluster at different levels, and then from the local and then to the national. And then the knowledge cluster, and then the knowledge cluster has been at the center of this project, this study, and then those different presentations. And then the practice cluster, and then to look at those different aspects. One of the questions that has been indicated by Stephen Karakezi is that, can we learn from the experience that has been again in the case of the geothermal? I will go far, far, far more beyond that, and then to see that it looks like very simple, but the whole experience of the stoves in Kenya, and then starting with the Jiko stove, and then it had a huge implication in the African context. One can gain some of the experiences in order to better inform and then what is needed and as a local content and in the innovation that is needed. And I think it's very important and then to have those different elements and then to see and then from what are the objective also of industrialization, what kind of industrialization, what type of industrialization, what key sector, and then we need to start the industrialization process. Because if you want to look at small scale agro-industry development, or you want to look at, I don't know, manufacturing, manufacturing car or I don't know what other good, those are completely different. And then how you approach those different issues and then how you approach the energy aspect, it's completely different. And I think that it will be very important and then to look at the, to discuss in depth the renewables and particularly the solar and the wind that has been indicated at the various level, and then to look at the electrification system and then to be sure that different projects will inform policies at national level, because it looks like also there is a disconnection, disjunction between project and policies. Projects does not, they are not relevant if they are not informing the policies at different level. That seems to be, for me, very important. It's also, just to sum up, and then we do have actually the ability and the possibility to look at the climate, and then that call for all the different aspects that has been indicated by the different speakers, and then from the sustainable industrialization, and then for the use of renewable and the decarbonization of the economy. And then those are some of the elements I just want to bring in for the discussion and debate. And thank you again for inviting me to participate in this gathering.
Thank you very much, Dr. Youba. It was a pleasure to hear all your comments here. I would like to give the floor now to Paul Embole, and I'm sure there will be interactions, and I welcome everybody to put their comments to Dr. Youba and questions again in the chat. But we are running a little bit short of time, so I'm going to give the floor now to Paul Embole, an experienced sustainability and green transitions practitioner from Kenya. Who has been instrumental, among other things, in the establishment of the Kenyan National Platform for Partnerships for Green Growth and Global Goals, also known as the P4G. So, Paul, are you there? And would you like to give your intervention, please? Maybe 7-8 minutes or so?
That's all right. Thank you, Margaret.
Thank you very much. Thanks for bearing with us, and it has been a long time, but great to see you again.
No problem. Greetings all. I think for me, my main intervention really is in relation to the sharing that has been done by the parties. I must say that I was I learned a lot having participated in yesterday's sessions and also today's, and then the inputs and the submissions made by the various presenters indeed gives a lot of opportunity for some of us to even draw in new insights and ideas in terms of how we do our engagements locally. My interventions really are based on partly anecdotal experiences, having worked on renewable energy for well over 10-15 years in Kenya, and participating in developing a community-managed mini-grid in one location, running on diesel with the idea to move it into renewable. The experiences of also having played a role in the development of the Kenya C4All Action Agenda and Investment Prospectus as the founding chair of the Sustainable Energy Access Forum in Kenya. But even more importantly, the work that I did working for the NIDA on green transitions and the policy formulations around that. So that's where I'm coming from. And I'd like to restrict my contributions to 2 or 3 things. And I would like to start by saying, I think part of the issues that affect how we can actually inform sustainable industrialization through the process of renewable energy deployment, some of the challenges we see is the black box approach to technology deployment. The fact that consumers or users are often seen as mere passive users, and therefore their role in that process and the potential of them informing the how and the what and the when makes it such that they only are there to receive a package and accept a package and respond to a package. And I think that's a key area of this conversation, because if then we're going to deploy renewable energy sustainably, and more importantly, promote certain enterprises within that structure that can inform sustainable industrialization, if you come at the tail end of the process to involve key stakeholders who are also users in this process, that brings an issue. And I think that's something we need to think about. Secondly, a lot of the financing mechanisms are in themselves deterministic. So they are tailored for big ticket investments, and as such have this big bang approach where you bring big technology. It is dominated essentially by big players who have the capacity and the wherewithal to actually deploy and deliver on such complex initiatives. So in a way, even by having financing mechanisms that are have a greater propensity for big bang approaches, in many ways, they're big projects, if I put it that way, that in itself then still contributes to that limited involvement and potential for inclusivity, and even for that matter, for sustainability. So it's something we need to think about and actually take some action on. Thirdly, scale matters. The possibilities to secure greater involvement of local actors and stakeholders, which has also been affirmed by the conversations that have been shared earlier, are very dependent on the size of the project. The bigger it is, the chances of finding local actors or even local stakeholders in terms of users being part and parcel of that also gets limited. And in many ways, that kind of goes against the bigger story, because the energy access challenge is a decentralized, small-scale challenge. It is village by village, community by community. Of course, integration is key, but ultimately, the final user is somebody living in a specific location and in a place where they are struggling to access that energy that they need to meet their obligations or their needs. So in a way, we need to start thinking through how do we enable possibilities and opportunities for small scale projects to actually find traction and leverage that to then now push the sustainable industrialization agenda. Now, it is important, and I think for those of us who had the opportunity to see the case in Kitonyoni, yes, energy was availed, but the energy that is there, how much of it is being used productively or being used for that matter? What is the capacity available and what is the capacity utilization? And you'll realize that there is indeed not a very impressive number in that capacity utilization story. So in a way, it seems that we are now moving into a place where we need to think about the whole value chain. Let us think of sustainable energy value chains, which is the broad story, which means both from the development, the technology itself, the provision of the same, the application, and more importantly, the utilization of that should also become part of the matrix, so that we are then asking, is there other ways we can deepen the use of this power to then be able to leverage the asset, but more importantly, also promote the core benefits that come through sustainable industrialization's ambitions, integration of the same in that. So in a way, if you look at what has been happening, there was a recent publication, I think that was 2019, that was done by C4All, which was looking into what they're calling the key maker approach. And the basic concept here is, how do you integrate productive use into energy deployment in mini-grid, so that deployment then actually has an anchor client who goes beyond just providing energy, but even supporting energy use in productive activities, which may leverage local materials. And in one way, this is much close to what Professor Banji had yesterday, where the issue of agri-cluster or agri-industrial clusters as a driver of industrialization in Africa becomes an issue, an opportunity for us. So this is really somewhere we see an opportunity of us thinking of capacity development as not only in the deployment of the technology or the design and management of the asset, but going beyond that to even the productive use capabilities. That is something that may deepen our engagement in this story. Then as I finalize, policy engagements around this has been shared upon. And I think we must commend the government for the many efforts that have been done to try and mainstream and bring up the issue of renewable energy, and even deliver on that agenda through both the plans it has and the action agendas that it committed to. But I just want to take it a step further. I think there's opportunity to deepen or to leverage the LRC, the local capacity rules or requirements, provisions even further to not only secure the development of that capability now, but also go into approach it from a progressive, what I think Professor Kremer mentioned as capability escalator. Let's be comfortable to start with small projects that do small developments, but as they move forward, you can see an incremental development of capabilities and sophistication as people gain confidence in developing small and therefore learn to start doing bigger projects. And I think that's something we need to see where and how we can bring that in and try and figure out how to take that forward. In conclusion, allow me to say that I think at the core of all these engagements and this whole matter of inclusion and participation or involvement, the whole question of coming up with sustainable business models are clear, for me are clear. And I think it's important we see how do we become more creative in formulating business models that are more flexible and that allow the participation and involvement of more actors. I think for me, I would like just to give that as my input for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paul, for these very, very pertinent comments. I mean, you couldn't see my head, but it was nodding like this a lot of times, and I read the report that you're referring to about productive use of energy and so on, and followed a lot of the Danida discussions about whether to address or how actually to develop financial and otherwise other types of support mechanisms that not only target the large-scale projects. It's a key discussion. I totally agree. So we have maybe some 10-15 minutes now for the panel to reply to questions. And Rebecca, are you ready to read out some of the questions? Maybe pick one or two per person, and then we can give the floor to the panel, please.
Yeah, thanks, Margareta, and thanks to the discussants. So I've collapsed the questions together into 3 overarching questions. So the first, there's a set of questions that have come in around insights from other sectors and countries for policy processes. So what are the insights that we could gain from other sectors, other case studies, other countries in relation to policy processes and improved policy processes in this area? So one example was whether there was something that could be learned from global case studies that are out there. And another question was whether, for example, there was something to be learned from the fact that Kenya has had quite a lot of geothermal projects for a long time, and whether we can learn something from that. And so that question goes, I think, more to Anne and to Faith. The second question is around the role of academia and government in ensuring more research in this area takes place, and filling the gaps in knowledge in this area. And I think that might go to Ulrich. And the third question was a very specific question around linkages with the AU and their renewable electrification initiatives, and perhaps a broader question to broaden that out a bit more and to link it to some of the discussion points that have been made by the two discussants just now around institutional capacity building, would be what are the linkages within the policy environment, or to what degree are linkages within the policy environment important? And so not just linkages in projects or between firms that have been the discussion of the first session today. So and that question would go to all three panelists. So I think those are the three overarching questions that I've found in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a specific question to Faith as well, but maybe we can start by Anne replying to the set of questions regarding insights from other sectors, cases or countries on improving policy processes. Anne, would you like to kick that one off?
Yes, Margareta, thank you so much for that question. I can't remember who posted it, but yes, of course, there's a lot that we can draw from other countries in terms of capabilities and local content requirements. There is a lot which has been done in South Africa and around the local context requirements and operationalizations of policies that have to do with local content requirements. So there's a lot we can draw from South Africa, and that is within Africa. But of course, there are quite a number of other, cases we can other countries that we can draw on outside Africa. But with regards to sectoral learning, I'm not so sure whether I'm in a position to answer that question, because I'm not very familiar with geothermal. Because I think the question which had been asked referenced the geothermal sector. There's a lot which has been done, and Kenya seems to be kind of leading. And the question is asking whether there is something that we can draw from geothermal as one of the sector for wind, particularly wind. I'm not so sure whether it is there's ability to replicate in terms of sectors, because the projects, according to what Mbole said, they vary, some small ones, big ones. There's a lot that we can draw from those dynamics. But I will leave Faith to answer that question, because she's probably more familiar with the geothermal and wind sector. So back to you, Margareta.
Thank you very much, Anne. And I think that was the kickoff for Faith to come in, please, and follow up maybe on Anne's comments here.
Thank you very much, Margareta. Regarding insights from other country processes, I would say that in the literature, there's a lot that has been written about China and India, how they have leapfrogged from very low levels of wind, small wind penetration to high levels of generation from wind projects. And I cannot go into the details, but there's a lot that has been written in the literature. Now, regarding other sectors, what is happening in the energy sector is that, well, there's a little interaction between the wind, geothermal, biomass, solar. I take this that maybe there could be mechanisms that can be developed to enhance interaction between the sectors within the broader energy sector. And that way we can be able to learn, because I don't think it is complicated, and it is something that can be set up very easily. Probably the issue is who would spark it off and how exactly would it be framed. But these are issues that can be discussed within the ministry. Thank you.
Faith, would you want to comment also on the questions relating to linkages with the African Union, maybe?
Linkages between
in terms of enhancing policies, in terms of enhancing implementation of renewable energies for sustainable industrialization?
Yeah, I've seen the African Union approaching the Minister of Energy on issues to do with the biomass. But I have not seen so much of electrification issues. Maybe they're in the electrification department, but I'm more conversant with the biomass issues.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
So then I think it's time for me to give the floor to Ulrik, and I can see both Anne Kingiri and Rasmus have asked for also a chance to give some comments before I give the word towards the end to Angela from the Calestis Juma Legacy Foundation to give words of thanks and closure. Yeah, okay, good. So Rasmus, over to you.
Well, thanks. I just wanted to make a very brief comment and actually say thanks a lot to both Sokona and Mbole for their interventions. I thought your comments were excellent, and they tie into the sentiment of this project. And I think basically what you said, there was quite a lot of interlinkages between the points that you made. I want to emphasize just one point where I think Sokona is absolutely right, at least in this project and many of the discussions, at least that I participate in, we do not have sufficient discussions about what you, Sokona, called the vision. Both of you mentioned that we have to think about, you know, these industrialization gains coming out of electrification, how they link to other processes of industrialization. What is the vision? Like, for instance, Mbole, you mentioned the agricultural clusters approach, and how can that create? How can we create synergies between such agricultural clusters, the types of renewable energy deployment that we would like to see, and so on and so forth. I thought that it was very strong when you said, Sokona, you said centralized energy systems are no longer an option. Very, very clear statement. And also, I think a statement that really ties in with the points being made by Mbole about, you know, small scale agro-industrial development. So for us, the important task here is, of course, how to think about how can we create the capabilities that are supporting both of those processes. And again, the black box approach does not work. This is something what I think we can say with very strong confidence in this seminar in the honor of Calestis Juma. It does not work. We need to have a vision, and we need to find out how local solutions, local technology can be developed, which is not black boxed. So I really just appreciate the comments that you have made. And I think I also picked up the notion of the capability ladder. So in closing, I just want to emphasize that all of the time we have to keep in mind how this ladder works. It's not a ladder that is one of those that you see in a shopping center where you are on one floor, you step onto it, and magically you are transported to the next floor. Unfortunately, this ladder, it works in the way that you have to take the steps. And I agree with you very much about the points that we should be happy with taking small steps. But nevertheless, you have to take the steps yourself. It's an active effort that you have to make. So thank you very much for those two excellent interventions.
Thanks, Rasmus. And Professor Ogata, I think it's over to you now.
Yeah, let me put on my camera. So 3 things that I would like to mention in the closing remarks. First is really to say a big thank you to everybody that presented and the participants. Initially, I'd indicated that I was going to leave and come back, but I just want to confess that I've not left. because at every time I was saying that now, let me start by listening to the presentation from Rasmus, and after that, I know I need to listen to Rebecca, and it continued until this time, a clear indication that I was really very, very attracted to the presentation and also the reactions that were coming from the participants. So big thank you to both the presenters and the participants for really keeping the session very, very interesting and attracted all of us to remain here up to this level. Number two is that I was the one that raised the question of distinction between rural electrification and renewable electrification. And I just wanted then with that to provoke all of us that traditionally, whenever we have talked about electrification, the focus has always been to provide lighting as a product to those who cannot access electricity easily. And we have always then not linked it to the productive use of electricity. And I'm very, very delighted the way Paul brought it out. And I would encourage all of us going forward that even when we talk of the renewable electrification, then that link of provision of energy for use in the productive sector becomes very, very important, particularly when then we are linking the whole discussion with industrialization. And number three, the issue of innovation paradox, as was brought up by Rika and contribution from Rasmus. It is very clear that it's a hot topic that we may want to pursue going forward, because some of us very, very strongly believe in investing more resources, particularly in Africa, on the use of existing technologies as a way of scaling up industrialization and realizing sustainable development. The whole concept of reverse engineering, for those who are familiar with the technology path that were taken by China, Japan, India, to some extent are sold to that concept, and might just be useful that going forward it is something worth revisiting. And finally, then just to reassure everybody, because there was a question raised by Mangeni, how do we ensure that what is coming out of this seminar series can be packaged and used to influence policy decision? And I wanted to just repeat what I mentioned yesterday, that we are very clear that for every seminar we'll be organizing, we'll have specific outputs in mind, and for this there will be proceedings coming out, and finally some policy briefs, and we hope with the policy briefs we'll be able to undertake some policy engagement with the policymakers. So thank you very much once more for your participation, and I wish you a nice weekend. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. It's been a pleasure and very good interventions here. I'm very, very thrilled to hear that you were not able to leave the session. That is a really good indicator. Thank you very much for revealing that. So Angela Castillo, now over to you for the final remarks. And I think I will, from this end, I will just say thanks, a big thanks to everybody. Angela, we will hear from you, and then towards the end, I think everybody can put on their cameras and we can wave goodbye to each other.
Thank you so much, Dr. Holm-Andersen, for conducting such a wonderful second day of the seminar. Hello to everyone. My name is Angela Christiana. I am the Executive Director of the Celestis Juma Legacy Foundation. It has been such a great pleasure and honor to participate in this inaugural event of the Celestis Juma Lecture Series yesterday and today, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which may happen later this year. Thank you to all of the panelists and participants for joining, for taking time out of your schedules to be here, and for sharing your energy and expertise. It has been very, very valuable. The themes and key takeaways from the IREC project are very aligned with some of the work that Kallestas Juma did at points throughout his career. Alison Field Juma has told me that Kallestas explored a similar topic in his master's thesis at the University of Sussex. So very appropriate for this to be featured in the first seminar series. I also wanted to just briefly reflect on the theme articulated yesterday by the president of the Kallestas Juma Legacy Foundation Board, which was that Kallestas always had a focus on people. And again, very appropriate to focus on capacity building, local capability, local actors, stakeholders, and their synergy with innovation and industrialization. Yesterday, the Kallestas Juma Legacy Foundation was introduced extensively during yesterday's event, and I encourage you to watch that recording when it's made available by ACTS. We will also share it on our website and social media. I have posted those links in the chat for you all to click on and visit later after this we close here. Just very briefly, the mission of Kallestas Juma Legacy Foundation is to advance economic transformation and sustainable development in Kenya and ultimately in Africa more broadly through the use of science and technological innovation. And our primary goal is to help local communities develop and implement innovative solutions to health, educational, food security, environmental, and employment challenges identified by local experts and community members. I'm very grateful to the team, the organizing team at ACTS, especially Professor Ogada, Dr. Kingiri, Agnes, Moses, and the whole team. Thank you so much. This is a great achievement, this event. On behalf of the Kallestas Juma Legacy Foundation, our board, I want to say a big thank you. It has been, I know, a lot of work, but hopefully very gratifying. And we are very honored by everyone's efforts. Thank you again. Thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you very, very much, Angela, and likewise to you. And here's a lot of waving to everybody. Please put on your cameras. Was fantastic. Anybody taking a screenshot, Moses? Are you doing that? I know you're good at it. More people on video, please. Great. Yeah, I have to say that informally, the IREC project has been underway for such a long time. So it has been a fantastic thing to be able to present the results today. And thanks to everybody. Thanks to ACTS, thanks to you at the CDALF for allowing us in. And bye-bye.